I love Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force run he did with these artists. I'd put it in my top 10 X-Men runs. I don't say that lightly, as I've read a few X-Men stories, but ever since I first read this run, there was one story I thought was missing something. I won't say this would have improved this run. It could have bloated a concise, clearly told vision, but I still can't help thinking about what could have been. Warren Worthington III lost his wings and made a Faustian bargain with Apocalypse to get new wings in exchange for his service as Apocalypse's Horseman Death. Warren serves Apocalypse before betraying him, eventually losing the metal wings and blue skin, seemingly returning back to normal. Later he gets the ability to sort of Hulk out into his blue metal winged form and back to his feathery not blue form. In Uncanny X-Force we find out Apocalypse left his mark on Warren's mind. There's still a fragment of Warren that is the Horseman Death after all these years. He wasn't able to walk away from it like we thought. Halfway into this run, Warren's dark side finally takes full control because Apocalypse is no longer alive. With no Apocalypse to continue the Celestials' task of ensuring Earth be ready for the Celestials' judgment, the Horseman of Death is promoted into becoming the next Apocalypse. But Warren wasn't the only Horseman of Death. Apocalypse had many Horsemen over the years, several of them were X-Men. Both Wolverine and Gambit were Horsemen of Death. Just a year and change before the Uncanny X-Force run began, Gambit was struggling with his Death persona resurfacing. So when Warren ascends to become the next Apocalypse, why is he the only Horseman of Death to do this? Why didn't it happen to Wolverine or Gambit? Is it because Warren was Death before either of them, so it's a seniority thing? I'm not convinced this would have been an improvement, but I would have loved to have seen Wolverine and Gambit struggling with the Ascension, working with Archangel, fully committed to ushering humanity into the next stage of evolution. This would have drastically changed the landscape of the Marvel Universe. It would be essential for this story to spill over into the other X-Men books. I usually hate the big company-wide crossover events. They happen far too often, we never get enough time in between these stories to feel the effects, rendering the "it's so big things will never be the same" hype moot, and quite often you'll find characters and series roped into an event where they don't belong. World War Hulk sees Hulk seeking revenge against the guys who sent him into space, so why is he wasting time fighting Punisher, Ghost Rider, and Ant-Man? Those guys had nothing to do with his exile. But when three X-Men are corrupted into wanting to push humanity into an evolutionary leap to save the planet, but also end up killing a few million people as a result, that's a big story, way too big for one series. At the time this was going on, you had Uncanny X-Force, X-Men Legacy, Uncanny X-Men, and Wolverine's solo book, all of which could easily be part of this story, since these titles heavily featured a trio who would be apocalypsified. For Wolverine's solo book, it would be fun to see the events of this story from the perspective of one of the bad guys. X-Men Legacy had spent the last couple of years showing Rogue use her powers in interesting new ways, so it'd be neat to see her try to weaken Gambit by taking some of his power, and she can use what she took from his memories to help the team do something. In Uncanny X-Men, we could see Cyclops and the non-X-Force guys finding out what the X-Force team has been up to this whole time. They made a big deal that the X-Men could not find out about any of this, and unless I'm mistaken, I don't think they did, except for Magneto, who agreed to keep quiet. Captain America found out about it later in Uncanny Avengers, but by then they had bigger fish to fry. This would be where the reader can see the other side of the coin. Wolverine and his friends convinced themselves what they were doing was necessary, but Cyclops and his team can say, bad stuff happens when you secretly murder children. Oh yeah, they murdered a kid earlier. Making this a big crossover would mean minimizing the X-Men's involvement in Fear itself going on at this time, and delay the X-Men Schism event for a while to give this enough room to have the impact it deserves. I'm not going to get detailed into what would happen, that would take way too long. The basic story would remain the same. Your Apocalypse X-Men hyper-evolve that one town in Montana, killing everyone and planning to do the same to the rest of the world. The rest of the X-Men fight back, everything is the same until you get to the finale. Since the only way X-Force could defeat Archangel was by erasing his mind, leaving him as a childlike being with no trace of the Archangel persona, they would have to do this to Gambit and Wolverine as well, which editorial might have a problem with, but I think I could make it work. Gambit and Archangel aren't exactly A-listers. Yeah, they're popular, they have fans, but it's not like the entire X-Men franchise hinges on them. But Wolverine is much more popular than them. The higher-ups would not like Wolverine being so fundamentally changed like this. But I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to do a big event like this, it needs to have consequences, preferably lasting longer than 6 months. So just like in the story we got, Psylocke uses the life seed from the alternate reality to cleanse the Horsemen of any influence from Apocalypse, simultaneously wiping their minds. Gambit and Archangel come away completely blank slates, while Wolverine comes out with some of his memories with some gaps. We can chalk this up to all the times Wolverine's mind was wiped. Maybe he's starting to build up immunity to it, or his healing factor was already fighting against Apocalypse's death seed, making Psylocke's cleansing of him less of an ordeal. Archangel's taken back to Utopia, where the telepaths tried to restore some of his memories by sharing what they know of him with him, though it doesn't do much to restore who he was. Gambit can initially be taken in with Rogue's squad, and Rogue can tell him, hey, we're really close. Emma, share this memory of me and Remy with him so he can see. And he'll say, yeah, I believe you, but it looks like you've got your hands full leading and training these kids, so I can't be in your way while you're doing that. So Gambit goes out on his own to rediscover himself, try to piece together his life, and atone for some of the stuff he did now that he has a new lease on life, much like what Professor Xavier was doing a few years earlier in X-Men Legacy. Wolverine is back to how he was before House of M. His mind is a jumbled mess. He kinda knows the X-Men, he has some memories from before he got his adamantium, but it's all fuzzy. I wasn't crazy about Wolverine having access to his memories following House of M, but this isn't just my attempt to undo that in exchange for the status quo I prefer. Reshuffling Wolverine's memories, not just his pre-Weapon X memories, but even some of what he went through as an X-Man, would give writers a chance to recontextualize his relationships with some of the X-Men. Wolverine was pretty close with Storm, but she's traditionally staunchly against murder, so how does she feel about Wolverine leading a mission to kill a kid? This doesn't absolve Wolverine of his actions. Cyclops is livid. Those people in Montana would still be alive if you guys hadn't killed Kid Apocalypse. Their blood is on your hands. Wolverine and the rest of X-Force are kicked out of the X-Men for at least 2 years, so this can feel like a big deal. Wolverine tells Psylocke Scott was right. Even though he justified what they did, this shows he can't cowboy around without oversight. This colossal mess up, along with Wolverine losing some of his memories, allows Psylocke to take command of X-Force if you want to continue the Rick Remender run as it happened. The team will try to be a little more careful about the life and death decisions they make. Seeing their fascist selves in the future will further cement they can't keep doing what they were doing. You could tell Psylocke was Remender's baby, and she really came into her own in this run, so taking control of the team seems natural. This likely would have required even more restructuring of the Marvel Universe surrounding what I've talked about here. Captain America would likely find out about this around this time, meaning you would have to do something different with the moral divide in Uncanny Avengers, but that's a small change. I think this would have been cool, but what do you guys think? Would this have been the bee's knees, or the biggest pile of no you've seen? I'll be back in the future to talk about something else. Until then, have a good one.